Imagine this: a quarterback drops back in today's soft, penalty-heavy NFL, and out of nowhere, Jack Tatum explodes into him like a human missile. Would the refs even throw a flag? No, they would throw Tatum out of the entire league by halftime, because what you are about to witness is a savage, untamed legacy the NFL no longer allows. This is not just a countdown. This is a journey into a forgotten world, a time when the Raiders were not just feared. They were feared for a reason. The men you are about to meet did not just play football. They played with broken fingers, bloodied faces, and no mercy. They punched, they bit, they bled. And if you think that sounds too extreme for the modern game, you are absolutely right, because these 10 Raiders were too tough, too violent, and too dangerous for today's NFL. In this video, you will discover shocking moments, forgotten hits, and NFL history the league no longer likes to talk about. So, do not skip ahead, because every name on this list brings us one step closer to the wildest, rawest truth about the Raiders' violent legacy. Welcome to History of Raiders, where the silver and black story is never sugar-coated. If you are a true fan of Raiders football, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a journey through brutality, pride, and unfiltered football greatness. Let us begin. Number 10. Otis Sistrunk, the man from Mars. He never played a single down of college football. He was not drafted. He did not fit the mold. But Otis Sistrunk did not care. Before the Raiders, he was a United States Marine and a meat factory worker. His road to the NFL was not through scholarships or scouting camps. It was through fire, grit, and sheer physical force, the kind of background that built warriors, not athletes. By the time he landed in Oakland, Sistrunk was an unstoppable machine on the defensive line. In 1973, he recorded an unofficial 13 sacks and 10 run stuffs, numbers that would have made him a Pro Bowler today if only anyone had been counting. Back then, those stats were not even officially tracked. His dominance existed more in fear and folklore than in record books. What fans remember most is not a highlight reel. It is the destruction. Linemen described his bull rush like a freight train with no brakes. Quarterbacks claimed he shattered helmets, and in some stories, even teeth. There was no finesse in his play. It was all violence, rage, and instinct. He famously became known as the man from Mars after a sideline camera zoomed in on his steaming bald head at the LA Coliseum, and ABC's Monday Night Football mistook his college as University of Mars. The nickname stuck, and oddly it fit. But there were no rule books on Mars, no tape reviews, no roughing penalties, and that is exactly how Otis Sistrunk played, like someone who did not care what league he was in, just as long as he could hit something. Number 9. Bill Romanovski, the linebacker with no line. He was not born a Raider, but once he was silver and black, Bill Romanovski looked like he belonged there all along. He played with fury in his eyes and violence in his bones. To some, he was the definition of toughness, a warrior with a motor that never stopped. To others, he was something far more dangerous, a man who did not just cross the line, he erased it completely. Romanovski's career was littered with fines, late hits, elbows, and personal fouls. He racked up over 20 suspensions and violations across 16 seasons. His tactics were not just aggressive, they were often deliberately cruel. Opponents accused him of spitting, kneeing, even punching other players in pile-ups, but one moment sealed his legacy forever. During a game, Romanovski bit another player through the helmet. Not a scuffle, not a reaction, a deliberate, primal bite, as if he had lost all sense of football and turned into something else entirely. His victim, J.J. Stokes, could hardly believe it happened. Fans were stunned. Teammates said nothing. In today's NFL, that moment alone would have meant multi-game suspensions, mental health evaluations, maybe even criminal charges. But in the early 2000s, it was just another Sunday. He would often speak about his mindset, how he trained to destroy the man in front of him, not beat him, destroy him. There was no switch, No calm, just constant pressure, just collision. Romanovski's toughness is undeniable, but so is the chaos he left behind. Number 8, Marv Hubbard. The fullback who brought pain. Marv Hubbard was not a flashy runner. He was not built for speed, and he never danced around defenders. He went straight through them. At a time when fullbacks were still warriors, Hubbard stood out as a wrecking ball in shoulder pads. Coming out of Michigan State, he joined the Raiders, with one purpose: to hurt the man in front of him, and for over 7 seasons. That is exactly what he did. He ran like he was angry at the field. Every handoff felt like a dare, not to score, but to break something on the way to a 3-yard gain. And if you were a linebacker standing between Marv Hubbard and that short burst up the middle, you were going to pay the price. It was not just the hits, it was how he delivered them. Lead blocks that folded defenders in half, shoulder blows that knocked helmets loose. He would smash into a wall of bodies and never stop driving his legs. He once said, "The shortest distance between 2 points is through a linebacker." That was not a quote, that was a warning. In today's NFL, Hubbard would barely last a quarter. The kind of blocks he lived for are now flagged as illegal. Hits to the chest, shots to the head, launching into defenseless players, all now protected under modern safety rules. But in the 70s, no one was protecting anyone. Hubbard played like the game owed him violence, and every time he touched the ball, he collected. Number 7, Phil Vopiano, the heart that hit like a hammer. He was loud, he was fast, and he played like every down was a personal grudge. Phil Vopiano was more than a linebacker. He was the heartbeat of the Raiders' defense in the 1970s. Teammates fed off his energy. Fans loved his fire, but opposing players feared his fury. What separated Vopiano from other linebackers was not just his speed, it was how violently he used it. He covered ground like a safety and hit like a truck, and sometimes that hit changed the course of more than just a game. In the legendary rivalry between the Raiders and the Steelers, Vopiano delivered one of the most infamous hits in playoff history. Lynn Swann, Pittsburgh's graceful, high-flying receiver, was already shaken from a brutal blow earlier in the series, but Phil did not care. He came in again and dropped him a second hit. Same series, same victim. Swann collapsed, dazed, out cold. It was legal, but it felt like something else. Steelers head coach Chuck Noll called it the criminal element in football. That label stuck. To the league, Vopiano was a reckless threat. To Raider Nation, he was a legend. In today's NFL, that hit would have been reviewed, fined, and flagged, not just for unnecessary roughness but for repeat targeting. There would be outrage on social media, analysts calling for suspension, lawsuits floating through headlines. But back then, it was just football. And to Phil Vopiano, it was personal. Number 6, Lester Hayes, the corner you could not escape. Lester Hayes did not just play cornerback, he redefined it. And then he nearly got banned for it. In an era where receivers ran free and defensive backs were often an afterthought, Hayes brought something new. Fear. Not speed, not technique, fear. He was tall, powerful and sticky in more ways than one. Coated in a layer of stickum so thick it dripped from his gloves, Hayes would lock onto receivers with both glue and grip. He called it science, opponents called it cheating. But even when the league banned stickum, Hayes did not change, because it was not the substance that made him dangerous, it was his style. He invented a brutal version of bump and run coverage. That was more bump than anything else. He would launch his body into a receiver at the line, wrap an arm around the waist, tug at the jersey, and when no one was looking, grab the helmet. He would slow you down with elbows, hold you through your cuts and dare the officials to throw a flag. For a while, they did not. He shut down entire sides of the field. Quarterbacks stopped throwing in his direction, but eventually the NFL had seen enough. Rules were rewritten. Contact beyond 5 yards, illegal. Hands on a receiver downfield, illegal. The modern game could not contain Lester Hayes, so it changed to erase him. He was not just handsy. He was dangerous, unpredictable, and relentless. Receivers called him a nightmare. Quarterbacks called him a problem, and referees, well, they just started watching him a little too closely. Number 5. George Atkinson, the safety with no brake pedal. George Atkinson did not hesitate. He did not wait for the ball. He did not worry about penalties, reputations, or consequences. He just hit. And when he hit, something broke. Atkinson played safety for the Raiders like it was open warfare. He was fast, lean, and unafraid. He patrolled the field like a missile with a mission to knock the soul out of whoever crossed the middle. But his name became infamous for one target in particular. Lynn Swann, the graceful Steelers wide out, was known for his elegance in the air until George Atkinson turned him into a cautionary tale. In a 1976 game, Atkinson delivered a vicious blow to Swann's head after the play. Swann dropped instantly. Concussion. Lights out. No flag. No apology. Just 1 year later, it happened again. Different game. Same outcome. Another hit. Another concussion. To devastating shots in the same brutal rivalry, Swann was never quite the same. The incident sparked outrage. Steelers head coach Chuck Noll labeled Atkinson part of the criminal element in football. Atkinson sued for defamation and lost. Even a courtroom could not clear his name. But the Raiders did not care. They loved it. This was what they built their image on: violence with pride. If Atkinson played today, those hits would not just be reviewed, they would be prosecuted, targeting penalties, ejections, suspensions, possibly worse, because in the modern NFL, what Atkinson did would not just be illegal, it would be unthinkable. Number 4. Ben Davidson, the punch that started a war. Ben Davidson looked like a villain, straight out of an old western, tall, wild-eyed, and armed with a handlebar mustache that curled like a warning. But he did not need a costume to intimidate anyone. All he needed was a target at 6'8". Davidson towered over offensive lines. He played defensive end like he was built from steel pipes, stiff, brutal, and cold. And once the whistle blew, it meant nothing to him. One moment turned him into a legend. 1969, Raiders versus Chiefs. Kansas City quarterback Len Dawson slid to the ground. The play was over. Or it should have been. Davidson came in late. Too late. He launched his helmet into Dawson's back with full force, no mercy, no hesitation. And then it got worse as Dawson stood up in confusion. Chiefs lineman Otis Taylor threw Davidson to the ground. A brawl erupted. Helmets flew. Tempers exploded. Flags were thrown, but not on Davidson. The game ended in a tie. The Raiders lost a chance at the division. But a blood feud was born. From that day forward, the Raiders-Chiefs rivalry became one of the NFL's most violent, and Davidson was the face of it. The man who turned a football game into a battlefield in today's NFL. That hit would have meant an immediate ejection, a long suspension, and wall-to-wall media coverage. He would be trending for all the wrong reasons. Analysts would question his mental state. Commentators would demand apologies. But in 1969, it just meant Ben Davidson had arrived, and he brought pain with him. Number 3, Ted Hendricks, the Mad Stork with the killer reach. They called him the Mad Stork, and the nickname fit perfectly. Ted Hendricks was long, lean, and looked almost awkward at first glance. But when the ball snapped, all that awkwardness turned into destruction. At 6'7", Hendricks was the tallest linebacker the game had ever seen. His arms were like vines. His wingspan alone could erase passing lanes. But he did not just cover space, he devoured it. Hendricks had a style all his own. He wore a bare left arm while his right was fully padded, like a gladiator shield. He would dance arm blocks with surprising grace, then crush someone with a hit that seemed to come from the sky. What made him terrifying was the combination, not just violence, but precision. He did not hit by accident. He hit on purpose, and when he did, it looked personal. Opposing quarterbacks had to plan for him, not because he blitzed often, but because when he did, he came with everything: a flying shoulder, a sweeping arm, A blow to the ribs, legal, mostly, but painful, always. Hendricks thrived in controlled chaos. He could cover tight ends, stop the run, or leap over linemen on special teams. He once blocked 25 kicks in his career, a number almost unheard of today. He might survive in today's NFL, but just barely. The hits would be slowed, the arms reined in, and the flags, they would come in waves for contact, for targeting, for intimidation that once made him great. But back then, Ted Hendricks was free to unleash every inch of his reach and every ounce of his rage. Number 2, Lyle Alzado. The monster no one could control. Lyle Alzado did not just line up on the defensive line. He exploded off it, eyes wide, teeth clenched, breathing like a man who wanted to rip the field apart. He was a walking storm, built like a boulder but fast like a sprinter. Opponents were not just blocking him, they were bracing for him. Alzado's rage came from somewhere deeper. It was not just about football, it was personal. Every snap felt like he was chasing something he could not explain and trying to punish someone for it. He admitted later in life that he played fueled by steroids for most of his career. He did not hide it. In fact, he said it proudly, like it was part of what made him unstoppable, and it showed. He would fight anyone, players, coaches, even teammates. He once ripped the helmet off a lineman and threw it across the field, not in celebration, but in fury. Blood on his lip, spit flying. It looked like a man trying to escape from his own body. His aggression was so violent, even the Raiders, a team that welcomed chaos, had to calm him down at times. And that says everything. In today's NFL, Alzado would not make it through a single season without constant fines, substance violations, and league-mandated evaluations. He would be flagged on every other down, suspended for outbursts, and chased by media headlines. But in his time, he was feared, worshipped, and completely out of control. Number 1, Jack Tatum, the assassin who changed football forever. They called him the assassin, and no nickname has ever fit more perfectly. Jack Tatum did not play defense. He delivered punishment. He moved like a shadow and hit like a freight train. Wide receivers feared the middle of the field when Tatum was back there, not because he might intercept a pass, but because he might end their career. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He just hit and walked away. In 1978, during a preseason game against the Patriots, Tatum collided with wide receiver Darryl Stingley. The hit was clean by every rule in the book. No flag, no fine, but it left Stingley paralyzed for life. That moment would haunt the NFL for decades, but not Tatum. He never apologized, never spoke to Stingley again. His only response was cold and sharp. It is part of the game. To Tatum, pain was just part of the job. He once said, "I like to believe that my best hits border on felonious assault." And he was not joking. He played with a level of violence that defined an era and eventually forced the league to change. Today, his most routine tackles would bring suspensions, lawsuits, and national outrage. The word targeting did not exist when he played, but if it had, every snap would have ended in a penalty still. His teammates never questioned him. His coaches never asked him to pull back. And Raider Nation, they loved him for it. Jack Tatum was not just a Raider. He was the embodiment of everything the team once stood for: fear, force, and unforgiving brutality. Once upon a time, the NFL was not ruled by flags or fines. It was ruled by fear, and the Raiders were kings of it. But times have changed. Today's league protects quarterbacks like royalty. Receivers get space, defenders get warnings, and hits that once brought standing ovations now bring ejections. So what would happen if Jack Tatum stepped onto the field in 2025? Would he be a legend or a liability? Would Lyle Alzado make a Pro Bowl or an emergency hearing? These Raiders were not just tough, they were too tough for today's NFL. They played through broken bones, led with their helmets, and hit with intentions no camera could capture. But even as rules evolved and the game softened, Their legacy has only grown stronger, because toughness, real toughness, never disappears. It leaves a mark. Now it is your turn. Which of these Raiders legends do you think could survive in today's NFL? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear from real fans. And if you love raw stories, brutal history, and the unfiltered truth of the silver and black, smash that like button and subscribe to History of Raiders, because the past may be gone, but out here it still hits hard.